Okay, hello folks. This is Alan Greenblatt. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me all right. Fantastic. Well, let's get this going. So I'm Alan Greenblatt. I am an Adobe Evangelist. And I just want to make sure you guys can see my screen, and I should be sharing my screen. So I just want to make sure that you see that front page. Everybody can see that? I'm flipping. So the survey pods are in the way. We're going to change that. I just want to make sure in the share pod that you can see my screen when I do this. Sorry, I have to do a little flipping. Okay, fantastic. So if we could just take just a minute here, everybody, it looks like just about everybody's filled out the surveys. I'll give you 30 seconds. If you haven't, please do so. And I just want to welcome you all to another Tech Live session. If this is your first, welcome. If you've been coming back, I appreciate the support and hope these are working out well for you. And please give us feedback. Tweet on Adobe Tech Live, send us a message, or send us a note on our Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/Adobe Tech Live. And one question that always comes up with everybody is, are we recording this? And in fact, yes, we are. And you will see a link to the recording in this URL. We'll post the link there. Plus, we're slowly building a YouTube channel, Adobe Tech Live, just youtube.com/user/Adobe Tech Live. So we'll be posting recordings so that you can, and there'll be links to how to take these videos offline if you're on the train or what have you. So we'll slowly be populating that. But let's get going. All right. All right, let's clear that. I don't believe that. I'm just going to clear that chat pod. So let's keep regular discussions within the chat pod. If you have specific questions for me, I won't be able to see them because while I'm presenting, but at the end, we'll take some time and I'll go through the Q&A pod for any specific questions I'll answer. All right, so let's get this going. Data-driven single-page web apps with WordPress. I was debating whether to put a question mark there, WordPress. So my name is Alan Greenblatt. I am an Adobe Senior Evangelist, and you can reach me on Twitter at @greenblatt and on my blog at blattchat.com. And we're actually going to be viewing my blog because we're going to be working with my blog, which is in WordPress itself. There's a lot of recursion going on in this talk here. You'll see what I mean. So to start off, I'm sure some of you are wondering, well, okay, what exactly are we talking about here? And, this is a little bit different rather than a Tech Live that's explaining specifically a technology or a product. This is some research I've been doing, and I just wanted to present this research. I think there's some really interesting ideas here, some interesting potential. I've gotten some great feedback so far on it, but I'd love to get your feedback, and we'll see where this goes. So taking some liberties to simplify here a bit, but in a traditional web architecture, your client, you're bringing up your browser, and it's connecting to some server in the cloud, wherever, and it's making requests of pages. Give me this page, give me this page, give me this page, and the business logic going on the server, figuring out, do you have, are you authenticated, are you authorized to see that page, that data, and if so, then it'll query the database and give you the right data that you can get, that you're allowed to see, and then generate an HTML web page, send that back, great, and your browser displays that. So, then people start doing AJAX type work where you can do asynchronous requests. So you don't always need a page refresh. But generally what people are doing is, requesting HTML for the most part. And there's, every single time you make a request, that needs to be redrawn, refreshed, and you're transferring not only the data that you're requesting, but all the layout and display information, and it's not really necessary. And in fact, especially if you're going to do, let's say, mobile offline, you want as much as possible, you want to be able to maintain state in the browser, have that rich app running in the browser, minimizing traffic to just the data that I need, not necessarily all the HTML. I don't want to have to go to the server to get the web page. I just want to go to the server to get the data that I have access to. So we use Ajax to do an asynchronous call to go get data. This is in the single page version. And the server returns generally JSON, the JavaScript object notation. And sometimes it can return XML if you so desire, or if you want, it can return HTML. But in this case, it's returning JSON, and that data can be used to populate JavaScript objects and work with your code in your browser to generate the HTML itself in the browser. And so you have a fully running app basically written in JavaScript. And that doesn't even necessarily mean that all the JavaScript has to come in at the beginning. You can use libraries like require.js to determine when you need libraries, JavaScript libraries that can be downloaded, so you can get things nice and efficient. So now, let me show you what we're going to build here. So let's head over to, I'm going to show you in Firefox. So this is a blog entry I wrote that explains a lot of what we're going to be doing here. And so if you look on my blog at BlattChat, you can see the different stuff. And I have 3 different articles around this WordPress idea. But what's interesting is within this blog post, we have a little app running. And it's trivial, but the idea is to get the idea of what we're doing here. And it lets you create new venues, and it's listing the existing venues. Ultimately, the app is for venues and events going on at those venues. But we can click on this. Let's see, the Wang Theater in Boston, and we go to the George House, and let's go over to let's say, it's not Elm Way, it's Elm Street, and let's save that. And I don't have sufficient privileges to edit a venue. So there's actually it's requesting data, but it's checking, does the user have the right permissions? Because I'm just in Firefox here. I'm not logged in or anything. But, and the same thing would happen if I do a new venue. I could type the information I'd get if I save it, my venue. So I get an error. So let's head over to here. All right, so now we're in Chrome, where, in fact, I am logged in to my blog. And you can see at the top there, I'm logged in. And here's the same blog post explaining everything. But now let's go to the George House, and let's change that to Elm Street 01234. And we'll save that and see how we can switch between the two. We can create new venues. And notice when I'm switching, the URL is changing. So it's actually my blog post with venues/8, venues/6. And what I want you to understand here is if we look over here and do an inspect, let's watch the network, what's happening here. When I switch between the two, nothing. There's no network traffic. But let's say I was to change this to Jamont Street and save that. Boom. All right, there's a request. Instead of an HTTP GET, where you would normally get a web page, or a post, where you do a forum post, we've actually changed the HTTP method to be a put. And that tells the server, we're going to do an update of this resource. So if we look at the URL that we specified, we went to blattchat.com, my REST interface, venues, venue 6. That's the ID for the venue I'm interested in. I'm doing a put. And if we look at the data that I posted, I said, here's some JSON data, and that's the updated data. And you could optimize this to only send the updated data. I just want to get this working, so it was just sending everything for now. And we can do the same thing. We can create a new venue. A new venue. 1, 2, 3 Main Street, somewhere in Massachusetts. All right, let's save that. Notice another request. Now we did a post to venues. Now, for those of you that are familiar with REST, this will make sense. So I'm just calling this URL to all my venues. I'm doing a post of this data. I say, I don't know what the ID is because I haven't stored it yet, but it's just its name is my new venue, its address is 123 Main Street, address 2, we don't have anything, but it's somewhere in Massachusetts. And I send that to the venues, REST/venues, and the response I get back is, oh, status, okay, yeah, that worked, and here's what's on the server. Its ID is 20. And you can actually go to blackchat.com/rest/venues/20, and there it is. That's the JSON data that we just created. And if you want to just get all my venues, there you go. There's Lang Theater, George House, my new venue. And I'm going to just flip to Outlook here to connect, just make sure everybody can see everything going on. All right, there's no problems. Fantastic. Everybody's good so far? Makes sense what's going on? Everybody can hear me? All right, good. So the only data going over the wire here is the JSON data and using this REST interface. And so if we head over here, let's just take a look, REST interface. I'm not going to get into a full description of what REST is, and this is not, there's always people who go, REST, it needs to be a full, what's called HADIOS. We're fully, you can look at the interface to find what's there and everything, and this is not fully HADIOS, but it's, I think I have the name right. But what this is it says, if you want to get a list of all the venues, you go to /rest/venues. If you want to get a particular venue, you go to /rest/venues, the ID of that venue. If you want to create a new one, you do a post to REST venues. You want to update an existing one, you go to /rest venues ID, and you do an HTTP put with the updated data. If you want to delete, you do go to REST venues ID, and you do an HTTP delete. So if we go here, take this guy, and we delete it. Now you see there was an extra request here where I actually sent a request to a custom method, venues user can. The capability I'm checking for is, can they delete venues? And this was just so that I would hide it in the UI. I wouldn't even show the user the option to delete a venue if they don't have access to, if they're not allowed to delete venues. The server, even if you did delete it, but you didn't have permission, the server would still prevent you from doing that. But we do the get, response comes back, says, yep, okay, no problem, you're good, you can do that. So then we go to resource 20, and we do request method delete. And now, there, great. Okay, so far so good. So let's build this. So the first thing we're going to do is I just set up locally, this is actually stage.blackchat.com is running locally on my local machine here. And I set up a totally vanilla WordPress install. And you have to bear with me, any of you who have done live demonstrations, coding and building stuff on the fly is always very risky, but I thought it would be most effective and people can see how this works. If I do this. So there's risk associated, but I think this will work. So let's go I've logged in here, and I'm in the stage.blackjet.com. And if we look here, this is the default Kismet and Hello Dolly plugins, neither of which is activated. So the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to build the backend. We're going to build the REST interface. There are many ways to build a REST interface, and you can do it manually. There's frameworks to do it. I chose to use, excuse me, we're going to add this plugin called WP-MVC, WordPress Model View Controller, and we're going to install that. And we'll activate it. Great. Let's go over here now. Okay. So we're looking in PHP Storm. This is just pointing to my WordPress install. And for those of you familiar with WordPress, there's WordPress, WP content, my plugins. There's the Akismet, that's the Hello Dolly. And here's WP MVC. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a terminal. And, all right, I'm going to look here. We want to be able to run that WP MVC, so I'm going to make it executable. And we're going to generate a new plugin. We'll call it Events and Venues. And this is our app that we're creating. Okay? So if we look here, we just created Events and Venues in my plugins. And if we go to go here and look at, excuse me, my plugins. Now you see Events and Venues, but let's not activate that just yet. All right. What we're going to do, we're going to go over here, and in this, we're going to go in the loader. All right. And this is just the default. So here's my app. It activates, deactivates. And if you'll notice here, this is the some SQL that we're going to insert to generate the tables for our events and venues. And I'm going to just go like this. All right. So this is just going to create two tables. Just create a little array here, events and venues. For now, we're only going to be creating venues, but there's some code in here for events as well. So we're going to create a table for the events and a table for the venues. And this table of venues is going to use the prefix for my database and venues. And it's going to, each venue is going to have an ID, a name, a URL to the venue, description, address, 1, 2, city, state, zip, primary key. One important thing is that it has 2 spaces there. And that's in the documentation for DB Delta. If you look in the WordPress docs for DB Delta, it needs to have 2 spaces. Not entirely sure why. But I have this in here now. And now, let's go and activate our plugin. Plugin was activated. And so what that did is it ran that code. And if we head over here, and let's refresh that. Okay. Notice now I have venues, ID, name, URL, description, states it. Okay. And I have events. And the rest is my standard WordPress. So, okay, so created all that nice and nicely. All right. So we have these tables, we make a request, and we're trying to build this REST interface here. So how do we get the backend to recognize when I make a request to /rest/venues to go to whatever method I need? So what we're going to do is we're going to go into my app, and in config, I'm going to create a new PHP file, and we're going to call it routes. And routes is defined here. So we define these routers where it says excuse me, losing my voice here. So if there's a URL that starts with /rest, so it would be blackjet.com/rest/something, well, that something is going to be our controller, and the action we're going to do is index JSON, which works out to be the method in our particular controller. This will make sense in a moment. And then we say, ultimately, I want you to lay out the response using JSON. You could have a different layout. The default layouts to send back HTML or XML or what have you, but we're going to do JSON. You'll see how that works. If the URL is a controller /some ID, then I want you to call the showJSON method. So if there's no ID specified, call index.json, and if there is, then we're going to do showJSON. And that's how we're going to differentiate. So posts, so for create and read, read all venues, it'll use index.json, and for just reading one individual venue or updating one or deleting one, it'll use showJSON. And this will say, if you specify a controller and some action, then that is, it's not a number, then it's going to use that as a custom method. And it'll look in your controller for that custom method. So you could say find specific venues, find venues by whatever. And so you can write a custom method in your controller. And these are all the standard ones. We're not going to worry about these for now that come with WordPress WP MVC. All right, so how do we create the rest here? So let's go into our controllers. Now, there's no controller here, but let's generate our venues controller. So we're going to say C generate scaffold events and venues venue. So let's create a venue. Excellent. So it just created a venue controller, created a venue model, and some other stuff under the views, but let's not worry about that right now. So, so there's your venue controller, extends MVC public controller. Now, there's a lot of reusable code here that I want to use for all controllers. So let's create a new PHP file. We're going to call this public controller. And paste all that in. All right. And so there's my public controller. So everything's got index.json. Check if it's a post, then we're going to do a create. If it's otherwise, it's a read, and we're going to read. And this is just going to deal with some errors. And otherwise, if it's and I should point out that all this code is on GitHub, so you'll be able to access all of this. Plus, this is recorded, so you'll be able to see all of this. If you call showJSON, then it's going to check the request method. If it's a delete, then delete that object. Otherwise, update it or read it. And I'm going to go, if time permitting at the end, I'll go in more detail as people want. But it's just, it's just decoding the JSON coming in and then calling on the model, great, with that data. And if there's an error, it says set on the object. And these sets are going to be used, set errors, set object, set object. Those are going to be used when we generate the JSON response. And we'll show that in the JSON layout. So we read, we're going to find, for reading a particular ID, find that one. And if the result coming back is not an error, then set it to be that guy. Delete an object. So it's just calling on the model, all these proper methods. So a venues controller doesn't do anything special. You could override this, but we're going to say it extends a public controller. But to do that, we need to do require once public controller. wanted to, we could override any of the read, create, delete, anything like that. And let's go into the model for our venue. And that's the default. But let's go here. And great. So we've created, here's my crate. And all it's going to do is it's going to say, if the user can create venues, and for those of you familiar with WordPress capabilities, you have different roles, and roles are, users can belong to a certain role, and roles are groupings of capabilities. So when you assign a user to a role, you can test their available capabilities. So if the current user can create venues, then call the parents create method. Otherwise, return invalid access user as insufficient privilege. And that's what you saw when I did it in WordPress. When I tried to create or edit venues and delete, check if they can delete. And I'm not doing anything for read. So I let anybody read. You just can't modify any of the data. All right. So you do that. You do your, you're calling the methods on the model, and now you want to return JSON. So we're going to go here, and we're going to create a folder called Layouts. And in Layouts, we're going to create a file called JSON. Now, if you remember in that route, we said layout is JSON. So there's your JSON layout. And there it is. And this function is just any system properties used by the plugin. It's just going to get rid of them. So you don't need to send all that data back when you're sending a JSON response. If there's any errors that we did, when we added errors, then add them to the response. Otherwise, say the status is okay. If anything needs to send back a particular message, like does the user have that capability, add that. And then if there's an object, set the data as object. Otherwise, if there's objects, do the same thing with the objects. And if it supports pagination, send the current page and the total number of pages along with that. And then encode that with JSON and return the result. Great. So let's do that. So we've got all this going. Let's go to stage.blackchat.com/rest/venues. Oops. Did I? I activated. Oh, come on. I'm doing something wrong here. Hang on. I think I'm forgetting something. That's it. This is what I was worried would happen. Problem with doing too much. Rest venues. All right. Well, let's. All right, we're not going to waste a ton of time here. I'll try to figure this out after. Let's. Because it's working on on Black Chat. I'll figure this out in a moment. But if we go here, Black Chat, REST venues. All right. Okay. That's unfortunate. Maybe I'll come up with figure that out. So what you normally should be able to do is from the command line you can run a curl. So we could do curl blackchat.com/rest/venues, and that returns the result, JSON result. And if we do curl sorry. Right. Well, that is really unfortunate. Okay. Well, let's go ahead. We'll do what we can here. So how do you create the capabilities and the roles? So what I do is I use a plugin called Members. And if we install Members, great. Activate that plugin. All right. If we go Users, Roles, and we can create a new role. So let's call this Event Coordinator, add role. All right, and you see all the default capabilities. We can see editor. There's different capabilities that everybody has. But if we go here into, I didn't add it. Event Coordinator, add role. What is going on? And coordinator. And coordinator. There we go. Okay, and I found that, there we go. So there's my event coordinator, and we can add some new capabilities. So we can say create venues, edit venues, and delete venues. Great. So now it has those particular, you can pick the ones you want. And now if someone who has the event coordinator role comes in, that in the model when we were testing whether they have those capabilities, they'll have them. So we can create a user. So we'll just say user events coord. We'll just say r.com. And events coord. All right, and we'll give them the role of event coordinator. Excellent. So now if an event coordinator logs in, they will be able to do that. Unfortunately, my REST interface isn't working, which I thoroughly apologize. So things you can do, if this was working, is if you look at these different commands from here, from the command line, we can log in. So you call the WordPress login, and you just say -c cookies. And I say login with, the username is events coordinator, the password is events coord, and it's going to put the cookie indicating that you've logged in this file called cookies. And in fact, we should be able to do that. More cookies. More. There it goes. So it created this cookie file, interface was working, then I would say using that cookie file, which tells the system that I'm logged in, post to venues with this. And if you look at City Center, it's just some JSON with another event, another venue. And then we can update it using the HTTP method put, and we can delete it. So now, if the REST interface were working, we would now have a nice little REST interface. But what we're going to do now is we're going to build the front end for this. So, okay. Let's head back in here. And if we go over here. So there's going to be, we need to, well, first thing you need to understand is scripts in WordPress are a little tricky. So any script that you want to show up on the page, the proper way to do it, rather than just putting it in a template and just declaring that script directly, is you should register the script and then you enqueue the script. So you can register scripts, and you basically give them a handle, a name, and then scripts will only be on the page, will only show up on the page if they are enqueued, or when you enqueue them, you specify a list of dependencies, which is a list of script handles. And so if you have a registered script that you register as that you enqueue as a dependency, then that will show up as well. So if you say, this needs underscore.js, then you just say, when you're enqueuing it, you say underscore is a dependency, and it'll just show up. So the first one is, there's going to be some functionality for our app. No matter what, any app that's written like this, we're going to have some common functionality. So we're going to call it EV for Events UI, and there we go. And that we're going to be using, you can connect to the REST interface any way you want. I'm using Backbone to build a nice app, have a nice model view controller architecture in the client itself, in the JavaScript. And I recommend, if you're not using it, to look into Backbone.js. And these are just some methods that I'm overriding, to creating some close method on a view, show view method on a router. I'm going to show what these are. And this is an important one that Backbone expects the data to come back directly, the JSON object to come back directly, but in ours, we're actually returning a JSON object which has a property called object, and that way I can send status as well. I can, indicate if there was an error or some messages, or here's a list of objects and this is the page number, stuff like that. So, so this is just saying when you get a model back, I want you to parse it, and we're just overriding the Backbone model parse method to say if it has an object, return response.object. Otherwise, if it has an object, then return those objects. And here's some methods, not worth getting into all the detail, but for loading templates. Great. Now, if we look here, so this is when this is all the code when I activate my, this is the code for my plugin, right? For my events and venues plugin / application. And I'm going to add some code to this to register my scripts. So I say when this is initialized, when the WordPress is initialized, I want you to call register events and venue scripts. And what that's going to do is it's going to register the EVUI script and give it a handle of EVUI. It's not actually going to include it on the page. It's just registering it, telling WordPress, here's EVUI. This is going to say, with that same handle, I want you to add some JavaScript code to the page itself. And so it's going to define this object called EVUI environment. And within that object, it's going to have where you can find your templates. And that way I don't have to hard code it. And it just knows that within this application /components/templates, that's where I'm going to be keeping the templates. So I keep everything very relative. I can just change that, move my template somewhere else. I'm not hard coding it in any HTML code or anything. I'm not actually using this. I thought that would be useful knowing the theme directory. But so there'll be this object available to any JavaScript called EVUIM, and it'll have a temple TPL-dir property which points to the templates. And now this is going to then look in a folder called components for any PHP files. And that way I can have a venue component, I can have an events component, all different components. I can keep adding them, and it's just going to find them and add them in as they show up. So, well, let's do that. So let's create a components folder. And if we go here, WordPress, plugins, events, venues, components, unzip, dev, BC, stage, work, /components, venues component, right? Okay, so that was my venues component rather than paste these in one by one. All right, so here's the component for my venues. All right, so it's going to load that in because in here it said look in components for any PHP files over here. And EVVenues is specific to the venues. And what it's going to do is add a shortcode available that I could put on any WordPress page. And I just say open square brackets EVVenues. So I add this shortcode called EVVenues. And when that shortcode exists in the page, it should call the EVVenues handler, which is going to declare this add venues script global. I hate programming with globals, but this is the one case. And it just sets that global to be true. And it's going to replace that shortcode with this, just this div EVVenues with two inner divs, list and details. It also, when it renders the footer, it's going to call EVEnqueueVenue scripts. And EnqueueVenue scripts is going to be called whenever any page, even if it's not a venue, something specific to venue, any WordPress page, it's going to call EVEnqueueVenue scripts, which is going to test, is this set to true? So basically testing, is this shortcode on the page? And if it's not, then none of this code will get included. Because otherwise you end up with JavaScript all over the place and duplicating and getting downloaded unnecessarily. And you just want this on the pages where you have this EVVenues shortcode. And then it's enqueuing. I don't need to register them because enqueuing will also automatically register them. So I say there's this JavaScript, the venue model, which we're going to give it this handle, and it's dependent on backbone and underscore, which WordPress comes with. By default, it has these handles, so it knows it's going to include those. I want to also include venue list, which is dependent on EVUI, right? So it's a view displaying a list of venues, so it needs to know how to do the UI, and that's our EVUI that we declared earlier, the EVUI JS file. It's dependent, it needs jQuery, backbone, and underscore. The details view, also the same thing. And the false here just indicates, I don't really care what version, I'm not doing anything specific with versions. True is really important because I want to put it in the footer. I don't want it in the header, which when you're including JavaScript will dramatically increase your performance of page loading. If you have to, when your page is rendered, it will process loading all your JavaScript in the head first before anything gets displayed. So if you have a lot of JavaScript in your head, it's going to slow down rendering of your page. So as much as possible that you could put in the footer at the end of the page, the better. So we're going to put all these scripts right in the footer. And this last one is the app itself, which is, if you'll notice, dependent on the model, the list view, and the details view. Okay. So any page that has this is going to have all this code included on it. And let's look at that code. So here it is in your components JS models and views, and here's your venue app. And we don't have time to do a full explanation of Backbone, but here's my app. Basically, I say at the bottom, when the document has been loaded, I'm going to load templates and EVUI. This is EVUI. So we've loaded the EVUI JavaScript file. It defined this object, which has an init and a template function, template property. So if we go back here into my app, when everything's ready, it's going to call load templates off that template, and it's going to load a template, a venue list head template, venue list item, venue list details, and all of those are loaded. And there's different ways, there's different code. Christoph Conrad has a really, he's played a lot of, has a lot of good blogs about Backbone and how to load templates. This is just one. When all the templates are loaded, create a new app router and start Backbone's history. So here's an app router. First thing it does is it defines some routes. So if you go to this page where this blog post, where whatever WordPress page is going to have this app, if you go to that page, by default it's going to call list venues. And list venues prints out to the log list venues. This is not important. If there's multiple views, if there's a current view being shown, you can close it. But if it doesn't have any venue list, which initially it won't, it's going to create a venue collection. And then it's going to fetch that collection. And that's a Backbone method. And and then when it gets that venue collection, it's going to populate the results with a list of venues. So how does that work? Well, it's actually pretty amazing, because if we look in, our venue model, we have a definition of a window of venue and a venue collection. And a venue collection just says that its model is venue, and it uses /rest/venues. So you access this collection by going to /rest venues, and a collection is just a list of models. And in this case, each model is going to be a venue. You can access each venue at /rest/venues. Here's its default properties. This is going to check when a result comes back. If the status is an error, then I want you to create a Backbone error with that type of error. And there's something with the WordPress MVC plugin that it requires everything to end with a slash. So this is just making sure that if you're requesting a venue, that it appends a slash at the end of the URL. That's it. Backbone then takes care of the whole REST interface, all the create, read, update, everything that we created on the back end working. But everything's taken care of. So when you say new venue collection and go fetch it, it's going to do a get of /rest/venues, and it's going to return a JSON result with all the existing venues, and it's going to put it in a venue list. And then we're going to create a venue list view, and we're going to pass in that model. And it's going to render itself, and we're going to look for something who has a class on the page that has a class of EVVenues list, and set its HTML to however that view gets rendered. So it's a little confusing. However, if we look at here, so this is the HTML that got rendered on the page when we put that EVVenues code in. EVVenues, and then another div, class EVVenues list. So we just put that div on. This app is going to say, when you've finished accessing from the server all the list of venues, and you have that model, create a venue list mode, then the venue list view, and render it into that div. Excellent. So what does this venue list view do? Let's look at the view. It says, well, we're going to wrap this view on the page with an unordered list. And if there's any click events on something with a class of new, then call new venue. We're going to get a template. We're going to use the underscores templating mechanism. And we're going to get the template called venue list head. And if we look in here, here's venue list head. And it just puts a button, class new. So when that is clicked, it's going to call new venue. And it's just going to say venues. If we go back here, and don't worry about the add right now, but if any time that the view gets reset, it's going to re-render itself. But when the view goes to render itself, it's going to render its template, which is venue list head. And then for every model, which is going to be every menu in the venue collection, it's going to append the element with a venue list item view with that particular venue. And a venue list item view is a list item. So in that unordered list from up here, it's going to put a list item for each one. And this one gets its template from venue list item. And venue list item, it just puts in a link with hash venue / the ID of the model passed in. So if you look here, we're going to take that model, and that model is just a JSON model that got put into a backbone model. And we're going to convert it back to JSON and pass that in to the underscores template. And it's going to replace the model's ID attribute with, when we look in here. So it's going to use the name, it's going to display the name and do hash venue / model ID. And if we look here, let's go to flat chat. If we look and inspect that guy, if you look, shows the event EV venues list. There's an unordered list. There's my button, venues, and there's two venues, list item. That was from the template hash venues /6, Warning Theater. Venue /8 is George House. And if I click on these, it's going to my current page /hash venue /8. And if you look back at our app with the router, if you go to venues /some ID, it's going to go to venue details, which is going to do a venue details view of that particular venue. We're going to get the venue from, if we don't already have it, we'll get it from the server, and it's going to create a venue details view. And venue details view, very similar to the other one. Now, if you click on save, delete, or close, it calls the appropriate method. And when you go to save a venue, first of all, I set this so that if a backbone invalid error shows up when we were processing, if the status that comes back says error, then alert that error, and that's why it said user had invalid privileges. Set the model based on get values from the page. The users typed in their venue name, whatnot. Set that on the model. If it's a new model, meaning it's never been persisted on the server, then create it. And all you do is you just say, off the venue collection, call create, and you pass in the model. And when it comes back, navigate to that particular model. And this is just saying, wait, don't do it right away. I want you to do it. I want you to not do anything until I get a request back, because there could have been an error. If it wasn't new and you're just doing an update, still you just call save. And that's it. And you can delete venues. That's where it calls making sure the user can delete venues. So get that. So here's a custom method called get JSON. Sorry, it's calling this method rest venues user can, because I put that in the controller. And that's why this doesn't work, because I never put that in. No, that works. I still don't know why this didn't work. So there you have it. It's unfortunately I can't show you on the one that I built, but you get the idea that we click around and it's calling those different URLs. And what's really nice about this is I can save that URL. Let's just go to a brand new browser. I go to this URL, and if you notice, it brought up my blog. But not only did it bring up my blog, but it brought up the details for the Wayne Theater, because that's the URL within my blog. It's getting that particular data. If I wanted it to bring up George House, I can do that. And there you go. Bring up my blog and give me the details on George House. So you can actually you can bookmark not only a page, but the state of that page within your app. So I am going to switch over back to Connect, and I'm going to see if we have any questions. How are we all doing there? No questions. Have I thoroughly confused anyone? I can be here. I mean, the event said it was only an hour, but I can stick around if this made any sense and people want me to see if I can figure out why that REST interface didn't work. Oh, and I should point out that all the source is on GitHub. If you go to github.com/agreenblatt, there it is. And this is events and venues. And this is all the code that's up on my blog. And if you go to blattchat.com, there's the first post just talks about why we're doing this, then how to build the REST interface, and then building the full app on the front end. So, all right, let's flip back here. Oh, the font is too small. Which address? Ah. All right. Let's do this. Start with that. And that's that. There you go. So that's all the code, that's all the stuff on my blog. And I think that's about it. It sounds more confusing than it is, and I obviously screwed up something that as soon as we end this meeting, I'll realize the silly thing that I forgot with the REST interface. And, I think one of the trickiest parts is just that you can't just load the scripts with WordPress. You can, ultimately, but getting some of the scripts with the registering and the queuing, it's a little tedious. But it seems to work well. And the nice thing is then you can, once you've got this working, you can integrate these apps, these components, these into pages, blog posts, and what have you. If you look at here, this is my existing post. So this is on blattchat.com. This is what I do. I say, this is what we'll be creating. And I say, EV venues. Hopefully you can see that. And that gets replaced with that. All right. And will there be a recording available? Yes, the recording is available and it will be .com/archives, and sorry, I should put it here. Plus, we're putting together, it's just starting, YouTube/user Tech Live. And that has recordings. I think there's only about 4 of them right now. So it's just beginning, but we'll get all the other sessions, we're going to get them up there. Okay, so let's put up some, if there are no more questions, if I've totally baffled people. I'm curious if people think this is a reasonable approach. Any thoughts? It's a lot to take in 1 hour. We'll go through the blog post and it'll explain how to do it. Yeah, it is a little, for WordPress newbie, yes. You know, what I was trying to accomplish here is, you know, a lot of people think, you know, on the one hand, you've got advanced, you know, programming, you know, use whatever your frameworks to build, you know, these complex applications. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have WordPress, which is mostly point and click and, you know, just type your content. But somewhere there, you know, I thought it would be very interesting if you get all the ease of use of WordPress, but then you can provide some very advanced functionality within WordPress and using WordPress not just as a blogging platform, but as a platform for creating some, you know, actually ultimately some enterprise apps. You know, so was this viable? And I think it is viable, but you have to do it properly because you can do it pretty inefficiently if you're not careful. Excellent. Well, hopefully we can get some more polls there, and thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.